Yep, that's me. You're probably wondering how I wound up in this situation, and for that, I have a story to tell you. It's a tale of love, loss, and what it means to give up. But we'll get to that. For now, it's best to start where all tales do, at the beginning. As I sit here in the heat of my failing AC, I wonder, could this be what hell feels like? And the answer is no, because that title is reserved for Devil May Cry 4's God Must Die difficulty. If you have never heard of GMD, or you're only familiar with it from the definitive edition of the reboot, this custom game mode for DMC4 is misery incarnate. Naturally, Devil May Cry 4 is a fast-paced action game with varying difficulty options for your consideration. The names of each difficulty level are stylized, but easily translate to common settings. Human is basically easy mode, Devil Hunter represents normal, Son of Sparta features rearranged enemy encounters in what is the game's hard mode, and Dante Must Die dials up the ante to max by giving every foe the ability to Devil Trigger, which is a powered-up state that makes them harder to push around, deal tons of damage, and grants them a plethora of damage absorption. Finally, we come to God Must Die. If DMD pushed everything to 10, then this modded game mode takes it to 11. In the Super Trainer, the program that enables this nightmarish challenge, you can set both the game mode and the enemy AI. I had to choose between no moral AI or max AI, so naturally I cranked it up to max, and I will surely face no repercussions for my actions. I regret this statement. But you might be asking, what does any of this actually do? And my answer is, who knows? Let's find out together. I wish I never found out, and I will never be able to get my innocence back. Mission 1 pits Nero against Dante immediately, and you can already tell things are changed. I noticed his hands were glowing red, which meant he was charging up his guns, something he does not do on any other difficulty. He also started throwing out some moves that boss Dante could never do before, like Round Trip. In a weird twist though, I actually found him to be easier than on DMD. It almost felt like his additional aggression meant that he left himself vulnerable to getting hit by my charge shots more often than not. And those shots absolutely chunk his health bar, especially in this first encounter. Making it out of the chapel and onto the street, we encounter Scarecrows, the introductory enemy. Now on DMD, the name of the game is Speed. If you can dispatch enemies fast enough, you will never have to see them Devil Trigger. But on GMD, you're basically guaranteed to see it. Whatever timer the enemies are on to Devil Trigger is greatly reduced. The reason you don't want to see an enemy Devil Trigger is it is extremely punishing. Not so much on these Scarecrows here, but later on it's gonna become a big problem. Fortunately, the Scarecrows were all we had to contend with up until Burial. Now this 20-foot tall solar flare is the quadruped king of the fire hell, and I'm an emo dude with a 2008 haircut wearing clothes that I found at Hot Topic. Mr. Fire Sphinx here has been going door to door selling buy one get one free tickets to his seminar at the local YMCA on how to eat shit. This is the most premature MF I've ever seen. You get him close and you think he's gonna blow soon, but all of a sudden he does it when you don't expect it. If that wasn't enough, when he is on time, apparently the wind pressure he exudes beforehand is even stronger on this difficulty, so you gotta get really far away or you're just gonna get smoked. Normally, bosses have an enrage mechanic when they get to 2 bars of health left, but this difficulty decided the bosses were also gonna Devil Trigger on top of that at about 80% health, because why not? Even though we did eventually show him who's boss, those seminars are running all week long, so I'm sure we'll see him again. And you know what they say, it's out of the frying pan and into the freezer. This frigid landscape introduced us to the Frosts, who are some of the friendliest little guys you'll ever meet. I'm lying to you, they will literally turn you into an ice sculpture for fun. There's a series of platforms you're meant to latch your way over to inside this sick and twisted castle with a spiked roof, except there's a nifty speedrun skip you can do, so naturally I did that instead. But as I stood in front of the door, my conscience wouldn't let me proceed. Skipping content when the Grim Grips might have been altered or changed in some way? I had to go back and check. It turns out nothing was different and I wasted my time. Moving on, I handily dispatched these Angelo armors and acquired what Cagliostro uses to switch bodies, which in this case allowed me to wield these gyro blades against my enemies. It helped me strip the armor off of this Blitz, the absolute worst enemy in the game. This fiend has everything: hyper armor, invincibility frames, high damage, and a big dick. Fortunately, as Nero, there's an easy loop once you get him out of that pesky electric barrier. If you get him into a buster grab on the ground, he will get launched up at the end of the animation. With proper timing, you can jump up and catch him before he lands, basically turning one grab into two. Do this loop a couple times and you're guaranteed to put him into Red Boy mode, which is where he throws a temper tantrum until he blows up. Up until this point, everything had seemed pretty normal, but then I met the Mega Scarecrows. In base game, these guys were simultaneously the biggest pushovers and the scariest dudes around. They could be absolutely bullied, but if they weren't your main target, they were about to do some scary voodoo magic shit you don't want to be around for. The way you could easily circumvent this was with Camera Trick, the simple act of turning your camera away until they were off screen. In this game, that's how it's supposed to work for most of the enemies. If you don't see them, they can't hurt you. Just like the monster under my bed. Essentially, the second they go off camera, their AI threat level gets lowered. But remember how I chose Max AI? Yeah, it turns out Max is a bitch who thinks it's fun to watch you scream running down a hallway. Max AI means that Camera Trick simply isn't a thing anymore. The enemies are as aggressive as possible all the time, no matter what. So these Mega Scarecrows were given free reign to do whatever freaky shit they want, whenever they want. Since I had my trusty Demon Eater 3000 with me, I made quick work of them, but there are some later encounters where I won't be able to rely on that. Bale, the big frog of the castle, wasn't too hard, but he was intimidating, mostly due to him leaving behind his big red ball eyes whenever he would disappear into the night. I got his health to non-existent territory and thought a dropkick would be the perfect finisher, until it didn't actually end the fight, so I spent another minute trying to sprint long enough to plant those feet on him again. Now that I was deeper into the game, we were seeing tougher enemy combinations, like this room that had several Frosts and Mephistos. Normally, I would focus on the Frosts first, but with the Mephistos being as aggressive as possible, they became much more of an issue here. Since the arena was quite long, I forced the Frosts to one end while I battled the cloaked creeps on the opposite side. From this distance, anything the Icy Ix threw out was easily dodged, and once you decloak the Mephistos, they pose absolutely no threat. After I finished up with them, their frozen friends were just as easy to dispatch. Max AI might have removed Camera Trick, but it didn't get rid of this other AI manipulation that I know about. With Frosts in particular, if you're using Nero's Buster on one of them, the others go completely passive whether they're on camera or not. So for this encounter, I continually threw one into a corner where I could instantly re-grab it, and his friend did nothing but watch from the cuck chair. Have you ever tried throwing swords at a window while standing on a tiny island amidst a sea of deadly electricity? If that sounds fun to you, then you may have hit your head recently and should see a doctor. Or you're a developer of Devil May Cry 4. Fun fact, Waifu Runs once told me the damage that the swords actually deal to the window is random. Why would they design it like this? I randomly got lucky on one of my many attempts and had the swords deal gangbuster damage time after time, so we could move past this boss and never talk about it again. Anyone who's ever gone through a window knows that you wind up in a forest, so that was our next destination. Things were ramping up enough that I no longer had qualms about skipping a few encounters to make my life easier, and there just so happens to be another speedrun skip you can do here. It circumvents the entire level and takes you straight to the boss, while looking sick as hell to boot. I did have to turn off turbo mode for this though, so I needed to refamiliarize myself with slightly slower timings, but only for Echidna. After she was done and dusted, we were given Sephiroth's fruit.
Shall I give you this pear?
And I turned the 20% speed boost back on as I made my way toward the best boss in the game, Credo. Nero's brother is fast and relentless. He's also got a shield, and he makes that his entire personality. You thought you were comboing him? Nope, you get 2 swings max. You're meant to use the Buster Arm to repeatedly send punishing punches at his blocker till it shatters. Once that happens, you're given free reign to juggle the hell out of him and cap it off with a devastating grab. What's more, below half health, he takes a scripted knee where you get another free buster on him, and usually that's enough to just about skip his second phase entirely by outright ending the fight, even on DMD. But we're not on DMD, so Kratos is far from squishy. As a result, I got to duke it out with the Order of the Sword's top knight at full power, dodging summoned swords left and right and getting owned by the best move in the game, Stinger. On my successful attempt, I impaled him with his own spear and landed a showdown, Nero's strongest attack, and that cascaded into deleting most of his health bar. To finish it off, there's one thing that Kratos can't block. Charge Shot. Ever potent, Nero's level 3 charged blue rose shot is like a gun. It's pretty lethal. I was worried about my trek through the religious military organization's headquarters, since if you don't present your ID badge to take the stairs, you gotta go through the animal cage elevators and death lasers. The first lift threw 2 mega scarecrows at me, but my fast thinking allowed me to neuter them thanks to Nero's busted buster. If you lock onto a foe, you can snatch them to you, so all I had to do was take care of one crow while occasionally snatching the other one to keep him on his belly. The second elevator was a battle against 4 Frosts, where I once again got to demonstrate the beauty of Nero's Buster completely shutting down their AI. The last platform that goes upward had a few lizards and then a blitz. Much to my own surprise, I was on the verge of taking him out first try, but while he's in red mode, he attempts to skewer you on his horn, trying to take you down with him. And he was fast enough that he caught me with it. Luckily, I saved some Devil Trigger to break out of the grab, so I did survive the encounter, but if I hadn't managed my DT properly, that would have been curtains for me. Heck, the initial hit of the grab nearly took me out. But with that, it was time to fight Agnes, parentheses, not hiding behind a window, end parentheses. This bugger liked to summon flying swords and fire gun dog things, which sounds like it would make the fight more difficult, but in many ways it was actually an advantage. To bring these demonic creations to the field, Agnes sacrifices a small portion of his own HP. And with the swords in particular, if I was in DT, I could usually smash them before they even fired at me. Staying in DT to hit them was also easier than you might think, because each one of these scary summons contains some delicious white devil juice, which makes you wonder exactly what Agnes put into these things. Anyway, he gets really aggressive at low health, often turning into a Beyblade and throwing land sharks at you. My attention was split between him and his hellhounds, and that almost cost me my life. I dodged around until my trusty charge shot was ready, got in real close to make sure one of the dogs didn't pull a "get down, Mr. President," and then I brought it home. Immediately upon leaving Agnes's boss room, I learned how bad Fausts were going to be. They are a stronger version of the Mephisto, and they send their little phantom peckers at you to give you unsolicited acupuncture after you've already told them you're anemic. I used to think I knew how to dodge most of these patterns, but now all I know is the sound they make when they take a life. I think Fausts and Mephistos might be number 2 or 3 on the list of deadliest enemies on this difficulty, right behind Mega Scarecrows. That's why I did this skip over a giant blender of doom to avoid fighting more Mephistos and ran right into the real battle against Dante. This fight differs from the Mission 1 encounter because Dante starts using his styles in addition to his grand arsenal of weapons. All you really need to know here is that if you ever think you have the upper hand, you don't. Dante has the speed, range, and damage advantages. The only thing going for Nero is Dante's ADHD-addled brain getting distracted when he should be focusing on the fight. Hey, you got a stain right there. Huh? Lady said I shouldn't have had that extra slice.
Here, let me wipe it up for you.
You got me again, kid. I had him on the ropes when suddenly he enter Devil Trigger? That's not supposed to be possible, but I guess it's a feature on GMD. He heals like a third of his health, and you straight up do not want to contest him on anything while he's transformed. It did feel like a one-time thing though, but maybe the DT was on a cooldown timer before it happened again. Either way, I was not gonna let him live long enough to find out. It was like I wound up in a senior citizen's home, because I jumped from one old man to another. This particular one had a giant stone statue he called the Savior. See, Sanctus grew up as a bubble boy, and the one time he stepped outside his bubble, this happened. So yeah, his unhealthy habits were immediately reinforced, which obviously led to him learning the power of levitation. After you break his bubble, he adamantly insists on social distancing like it's 2020, and this constant air backdash he stole from Melia Rage can trip up a lot of people. If you chase him, he's gonna keep running. What you want to do is let him get to a comfortable distance, and the second he starts an attack, that's when you approach. Below half health, if you fail to knock him down after breaking his bubble, he does retreat into his statue for an attack, but you can easily buster the punch to force the Pope out and onto the ground immediately. Mr. Order of the Sword got the last laugh though, because he captured Nero, which meant it was Dante's time to take center stage. And because of that, I now know what eternal damnation feels like. The very first mandatory encounter for Dante is 3 Mega Scarecrows. They Devil Trigger immediately, so stun locking even one of them was difficult. And on top of that, the other 2 I wasn't focused on were definitely focusing on me. I tried everything. I built up my disaster gauge on the little scarecrows in the starting room so that I could rain down hellfire and brimstone in the form of heat-seeking missiles on the Mega Men, but I ran into 2 issues there. One, they were quite healthy, so 2 full barrages usually wouldn't even eliminate one of my problems. And 2, this room was kinda small, so sometimes the rockets just hit the wall and did nothing. I tried setting traps with Lucifer, leaving pins for the crows to run into, but then surviving long enough for the actual payoff became the foil to that plan. Even Stinger, the undisputed best move in the game, couldn't crack their stalwart defenses. That's when I remembered the optimal way to defeat Virgil in DMC3, and if it could stop him, surely it would be enough to take down these scarecrows as well. So on my next attempt, I started bouncing on it. Using Full House, Dante's dive kick, I could hit the enemy and then cancel the move with an enemy step, setting me up perfectly to queue up another kick. As long as I kept doing this, I not only moved up and down enough to throw off the other scarecrow's tracking, I also staggered my target with every hit, which let both me and him slowly move horizontally around the arena. This strategy was so effective that it failed just like the rest. But it was the attempt that both lasted the longest and got me the farthest, so I decided to do what I'm good at. Take that small advantage and bash my head against a wall until I pushed it far enough to get me through. As long as I properly timed my Devil Trigger entries to tank some hits and keep attacking, the first scarecrow would fall no problem. That only left one of them free to attack me while I bullied his friend, and 1 is much less scary than 2. With a little bit of luck, the second bag of hay went down, and then I was free to do whatever I wanted to the last one. The rest of the mission was so much easier than that first room. You can entirely skip an encounter against some frosts, and when it came to Faust and Mephistos by themselves, Dante has a variety of ways to swiftly decloak the critters. Once they're full Monty, a simple prop into real impact could take them out effortlessly. The last thing that stood in my way were some Angelos, and they could be pretty lethal. So on my second go around, when I got knocked to low health, I had 6 whole minutes left on my timer and decided to play it safe. This Alto Angelo has legs and he cannot jump, so while he struggled to solve the riddle of the rail, I safely pelted him with my shotgun. Sure, it took 3.5 minutes to defeat him like that, but it was worth it. The theme of insanely hard first encounters continued into the next mission, where I had to face off against several Chimera assaults. The assaults themselves are super dangerous, and when you add a passive hitbox to them, they become downright diabolical. Once again, I felt like I wanted to go into this fight with some sort of upper hand, but the only enemy before that encounter was a blitz. That sounds like a bad thing, but if you're a knower, it's probably the best enemy that could be there. The blitz covers itself in an electric barrier that causes melee hits to bounce off of it and damage you instead. But Dante likes knowing when he's about to get hit. If you use the dive kick and then press Royal Guard, you'll usually get a perfect block against the retaliation damage the blitz sends out. This simultaneously breaks the enemy's shield while nullifying damage from it and building both your DT meter and Royal Guard gauge. Then, after its shield would break, I used Pandora to build my disaster gauge so that I could once again rain down hellfire and brimstone in the form of heat-seeking rockets. This time around, the strat was super effective as it let me eliminate one of the assaults immediately. Once again, 2 was much less dangerous than 3, but the danger didn't stop with these guys. Another theme you'll notice with Dante's missions is
bad checkpoints.
So after mopping up this encounter, I had to deal with some more assaults in the next room with no checkpoint between them. After those flying lizards were dealt with though, it was a clean sprint to the boss, Echidna but again. As Dante, the main thing you gotta know is her route patterns, when you can stay in her face and when you have to jump away. While she was on the ground, I used Lucifer to thrust my pins with great force, and anytime she tried to get me with a flyby, I would run over to the obelisk where you can basically be assured she won't hit you. From there, I used Pandora to build my disaster gauge and occasionally chunk her with some missiles, ultimately finishing off the fight with a barrage of them. After beating her, I needed to move on to bleaker pastures. The forest was just too green for me. This escape sequence features faults, hungry little blue guys. They appear under your feet and try to eat you. They seem near infinite if you don't know how they work, but the truth is quite simple. Imagine each map is split into quadrants. There are a handful of these faults in each square, and they can't move out of their respective area. So if you eliminate all of the faults in any given section, you can safely stand on the ground without fear of being eaten. This knowledge allowed me to carve out a safe space to fight the enemies, and as a result, none of the encounters were that bad in this mission. The same cannot be said for my Fortuna Castle revisit. This is the mission that broke me. There's a kind blitz that welcomed me back, and he was fine. After him, you get a checkpoint. One encounter, one checkpoint. A trend the devs had no intention of keeping up. What follows is a lineup worse than Netflix's release schedule for Steel Ball Run. First up, you gotta contend with some Angelos, 1 captain and 5 soldiers. Not altogether too bad, though they can certainly get some quick hits on you if you're not careful. After that, we've got a banquet hall filled with scarecrows. Among them, of course, are a few mega scarecrows sprinkled in. Okay, fine, if I managed the spawn order well enough by selectively targeting the scarecrows, I'd have to deal with only 2 megas at once. Still not an easy task, but not impossible. Remember though, we won't have a checkpoint until after we clear the next room, which was a long, narrow space called the Torture Chamber. That name was a little too on the nose. You start out facing 3 Frosts, an enemy that was easily dispatched by Nero thanks to AI manipulation. Dante had no such technique. The best I could do was use prop, fail to launch the guy, prop him again, and then have my real impact interrupted by one of his friends. Did you know that the Frosts can also heal themselves? Yeah, that neat ice barrier they encase themselves in, if left unhindered, they could just decide to heal up a solid chunk of health. Hell, sometimes the one I was targeting ignored me completely and went into his icy cocoon anyway. Like literally me attempting to murder him did nothing to stop him from healing. And then if you try to break them out before they heal, you become a sitting duck swinging at the iceberg that sunk the Titanic. It's just not gonna happen, and you're probably going down with the ship. As if all of that wasn't bad enough, let's assume we did manage to melt one of these fuckers. Guess who comes in to take his place? Faust. fucking Faust. Who the hell invited this lanky bitch? Between dodging him trying to finger me, the frosts turning me into an ice pop and regenning like the healer just used LB3, it felt like doing anything became so suffocatingly impossible. Every time I died here, I couldn't even simply retry the encounter. I had to make my way through the other 2 fights first, which were no slouches in their own right, just so I could immediately bite it on the frosts all over again. After about my 20th run back, I decided I've done these first 2 battles enough, so I basically created my own checkpoint for the 3rd fight by using holy water to wipe out the Angelos and Scarecrows. I think that's fair. I obviously showed I was competent enough to consistently get past them, and I just wanted more attempts at the thing that was actually impeding me. So using the custom checkpoint strategy TM, I threw more and more attempts at this torture chamber. Each and every one was met with crushing, hopeless defeat. This was it. This was the combination of enemies that was too much for me. No strategy I devised saw any measure of success. No plan got me any farther into the encounter, and no amount of perseverance was able to push me through to victory. The faith I had in my own abilities was gone. I kept trying, but my heart was no longer in it. I felt nothing but disdain, and that's when it happened. The cracks that slowly formed with each loss coalesced and shattered. I broke. The demons tried to strike me down as they had countless times before, but every cut, no matter how deep, healed nigh instantly. I had become an unshakable demon, tapping into the power I had rejected for so long. Vital stars. I healed with vital stars whenever they got me low, which was a lot. Moving on from that dumpster fire, I had a checkpoint, like a real bona fide checkpoint. That's what I thought anyway. So you can imagine my surprise when this blitz got the upper hand on me and I wound up all the way back before the Angelos. Yeah, this one was my bad. I've been talking about those fancy speedrun skips all video, and in this instance, I shouldn't have done one that I did. After the torture chamber, you gotta go down to go up. But there's a skip that lets you circumvent going down, and naturally I did that. Turns out the checkpoint is also down that pit, and even better, it's free. There's no encounter down there. I just had to jump in and boom, I would have been set. But in trying to save a few seconds, I cost myself another half an hour. At this point, Bale's Brudda Dagon was a walk in the park compared to the other residents of this evil castle. And right after he was taken care of, I got to demonstrate the coolest skip in the game. It's called Gas Skip, and it has you avoid like 70% of the mission, where all we had to do was take out a couple dogs and then we were already at Burial. This is the guy that will stun lock you with wind pressure 5 seconds before his giant nuke actually hits you, so all you can do is watch as half your health bar gets deleted because he sneezed. My typical strategy of pinup with Lucifer was doing not so much damage, but that's alright. I don't play DMC for the damage. In fact, I wish my attacks did even less. If I don't feel like I'm smacking demons around with a wet napkin, then what's even the point? It's just so unsatisfying to see a health bar go down. If I'm hitting you, I better be doing fractions. Better yet, why can't my attacks heal the enemy so that the combat never ends? Am I right, fellow gamers? My solution to the damage situation was to Royal Guard certain key attacks so that I could eventually take a nice big chunk out of his right nipple specifically. With only a left nipple to his name, he was thrown off balance, and that allowed me to overwhelm him with missiles, shotgun pellets, and a fatal blow to his right Achilles. Then we walked into the wrong alleyway. This place was filled with assaults and Mephistos, and a Faust to top it all off. After many attempts here at the first encounter of another set of 3 with no checkpoint between them, I ultimately decided to take care of the root of the problem. Max AI was the thing disabling camera trick and making enemies so aggressive that sometimes damage was unavoidable. And I just wasn't having fun with that anymore. So while I stayed on GMD, I did put the AI to no moral. And I mean, the difference was like night and day. It almost felt like cheating with how passive they were being, but the reality was that I was so used to the unfair hyper-aggression that I couldn't properly interpret what regular fair aggression felt like. There was something cathartic about keeping a Mega Scarecrow neutered just off screen while I farmed him for DT, and before long I came face to face with the Lord of Flies, Agnes. He does a lot of flitting about, and he's got quite the health pool to boot. I threw Lucifer pins into him when he was on the ground, and if he was too high up, I'd just jump and shotgun instead. Anytime he summoned ads, I'd switch my attention to them immediately, because they would cause more problems than the boss himself. The swords were shot down with the shotgun, and the dogs got to taste the might of Stinger. If Agnes tried to charge up his big sucky, I had to run over and use Yamato aerial combo to knock him out of it. But generally, as long as I kept the creations in check, the big man himself wasn't that big of a threat. At low health, he started trying to spin to win like he mained Galanza in Grand Blue Fantasy Relink.
If you wanna win, you gotta spin!
But all you have to do to avoid it is walk away and jump when you see him rise up. The whole shebang took a while to chip him down, but consistency was key, and we eventually squashed the bug, only to have the savior try to crush us in turn. This guy always starts off firing his laser, and I thought you were safe to stand at the far edge of this platform, so either it's been far too long since I've played, or GMD extended how long the beam goes for. Either way, it was at this moment I knew I fucked up. My favorite thing to do here is Royal release his melee attacks. After you counter a few of them, it'll trigger the knockdown, letting you go ham on the core and sail through the last part of Dante's section. What followed was a boss rush with Nero, rehashing every painstaking fight we suffered through all over again. They provided little challenge since there was no window to contend with, because they knew what they were doing with that one and were not about to force people to fight it again. Then the only thing left to do was take out Sanctus once and for all. This particular arena was smaller than the one he was originally fought in, so chasing him down was much more of a guaranteed thing. All in all, he was nothing special. He went down and that's it. The game had been beaten on God Must Die, but not entirely on Max AI, which I think is for the best. GMD is fun. Max AI is not. Alright, sometimes it was, but other times it was just miserable. The difficulty itself forced me to interact with Devil Trigger a lot more than DMD ever had, and I welcome that. It's neat to be able to explore a mechanic you don't often have a chance to see in full force, and I got the opportunity to do just that. The DT on bosses was also an interesting layer that made already deadly encounters become a beautiful dance where mortality hung on a razor's edge. A single misstep could mean defeat, and you also had to hit the boss about 500 times to get anywhere. Point is, the difficulty was fun. Moral of the story though, keep your hubris in check and don't play on Max AI. That's all I've got for you today. If you enjoyed and aren't already subscribed, you should totally hit that button. Also, don't forget to like and comment, and I hope you have a wonderful day. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Sayonara.